Welcome. I'm Terry Kramer, Faculty Director of the Easton Technology Management Center, and I'd like to welcome you to the special event, The Future of Innovation, Working Across Boundaries for Transformative Societal Outcomes. Now, we live in a world today that's got huge opportunities, but also huge challenges in almost every sector. There's an important leadership call to action to understand society's greatest problems and to identify solutions, to resource organizations appropriately, and ultimately to lead in a way that creates value for all stakeholders, whether that be shareholders, customers, employees, and society. Tonight's program is a great example of the spirit of collective effort, which is essential to success. This program exemplifies an invaluable partnership between the Anderson School and the greater UCLA community. Our many students, faculty, and alumni who are committed to innovation and advancements in healthcare and sustainability. I'd like to especially acknowledge the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, Rayton, UCLA's Institute for Carbon Management, the UCLA Sustainable LA Grand Challenge, and UCLA Health for their generous sponsorship of this innovation challenge. I'd also like to thank UCLA Anderson's Dean Tony Bernardo for his continued support of this very important cross-campus initiative and all the partners we have worked with across campus that helped us share this opportunity with their students. Now, I hope you learn from this program, and it encourages all of you to think about innovation opportunities that can be transformative in society and the many learnings that come along with it. Specifically tonight, we have two objectives. First is to share with you latest areas of technology-based innovation and their importance, with a special focus on robotics, healthcare, and sustainability. Our second goal is to highlight the goals and three winning teams from this year's Easton Center Innovation Challenge. Now, in terms of specifics, we're going to begin with a fireside chat with Nan Boden, COO of Everyday Robots, a learning robot moonshot at Alphabet that was born at X, the moonshot factory. She'll describe the latest areas of innovation with Everyday Robots and their impact, not just on individuals, but impact on enterprises and society. This conversation then will be followed by an overview of our innovation challenge, and we'll hear quick pitches from the winning teams, followed by Q&A. So I hope you find these discussions insightful and invaluable in your own leadership journey. Now, as I mentioned, I can't think of a better keynote speaker than Nan Boden, Chief Operating Officer at Everyday Robots, a learning robot moonshot at Alphabet that was born at X, the moonshot factory. Nan's got a very impressive background. She joined Google in 2013 via an acquisition into Google's data center division, where she handled various strategic initiatives, as well as several mergers and acquisitions. At Google, she spent her career working at the strategic intersection of technology and business. She helped found and scale Google's Cloud Global Technology Partners team, which developed hundreds of technology partnerships, including Google Cloud's foundational partnerships with SAP, Cisco, and Salesforce. Prior to Google, she had a 19-year career at Miracom, which is a Caltech spinoff that was a pioneer in high-performance computer networking. She started as a software engineer and later moved into business roles such as EVP, CFO, member of Miracom's board, and ultimately CEO. She earned her PhD and master's degrees in computer science from Caltech. Her PhD research, runtime systems for fine-grained multi-computers, led her directly into her work at Miracom, where she wrote the operating system that controlled the company's first products. She received her bachelor's degree in applied mathematics from the University of Alabama and is a proud UCLA Anderson alum. Now, for today's session, I'm going to ask Nan a variety of questions that gets her view on a variety of issues, and then we'll go to Slido for a moderated Q&A. The Slido event code is Easton1, the number 1. So just go to Slido, SLIDO.com, and you can either enter in your own question or upvote an existing one. And again, as a reminder, the event code is Easton and the number 1. So before I start out with my conversation with Nan, we'd like to show you a brief video that'll give you just a window into everyday robots.
Robots today are still struggling with doing the most basic things. The reality of robotics is that picking up a cup off a table, if a robot could do that in any environment it was in, kind of sitting next to us, that almost requires a Nobel Prize. It's that hard. If we rewind prior to the mid-70s, mainframes were big, very expensive machines that required scientists to operate them. They weren't really accessible to everyone. Then the microprocessor was invented, and all of a sudden we had the beginning of the personal computer revolution.
It's called a chip.
Computers are the future.
They're everywhere because they're useful, they're doing things.
Your home computer to read the day's newspaper. Well, it's not as far-fetched as it may seem.
They became these general-purpose machines that could do multiple things, and eventually the smartphones that we carry around with us everywhere today. Something very similar is happening in robotics. We've had mainframe robotics or industrial robotics for 20, 30, 40 years. And I think we're now on the cusp of transitioning into everyday robots. What we are ultimately doing are building machines that can live and operate among humans one day.
Our goal is to create a platform that enables lots of different people to program and teach these robots to do lots of different things.
We know that that's going to just have a huge multiplicative effect where the robots are out there in the world doing things that we never could have imagined and helping people. That's the goal.
I think robots can add a tremendous amount of value to society. They'll work alongside us. They'll be our partners. That's not where robots are today. Robots are very simple machines, can barely move around without bumping into things.
Hey, robot, let's go for a walk.
Let's go.
So now it's basically in this, it's probably not the best thing. Okay. All right, that is bad. We should definitely cut that out.
There's this thing called Morvik's paradox. It states that in artificial intelligence, the hard things are easy and the easy things are hard. Basic motor control, perception, navigating a crowd at a baseball game or something like that. These things are not actually easy. They're easy for us because they have to be, otherwise we wouldn't survive. So evolution has prepared us over millions of years to be good at the things that are essential to our survival. Our brains weren't built to play chess, but they're so flexible and so capable that we can sort of shoehorn them into this weird problem and get them to do, planning and algebra and so on, and it takes us a lot of effort. For machines, they can do the algebra and math out of the box, but the things that are intuitive, the things that are common sense, those we have to actually help them do, and that's been one of the biggest challenges in robotics.
Nan, what a great video. Starting out, with the complexity of what you're trying to pull off against the upside of kind of the gain and impact and the idea of machines being right next to humans. So first of all, just a big welcome. It's great to have you here.
Great. Thank you, Terry. I've been very much looking forward to it and seeing you and having the great conversation about the innovations.
Well, let me start out because, listening to your background, introducing you and kind of talking about your CEO role at Miracom and then going to Google Cloud and leading all these global partnerships and now, Chief Operating Officer on the Everyday Robots. Just tell us a little bit about the leadership journey. How did you get from place to place? What were the challenges, opportunities as you moved along?
Well, first of all, I'm very grateful for these opportunities. I think it's been quite a journey, and I've really enjoyed each of those chapters. I think they've each led to the next one. I think from a leadership journey perspective, each of them brought a challenge that was more about what kind of impact can I have? Can this overall enterprise have? How can we make that impact larger? And particularly once I got to Alphabet and to Google, the scale at which Google and Alphabet operate. Just scaling, both yourself and your impact in your project is just a huge challenge, no matter whether it's in a startup or it's in, a company like Alphabet. So I think the overall thing in my leadership journey has been, trying to follow a vector of impact, and also trying to make sure that I'm living the values that are really important, making sure that impact is for the better of, my community, my employer, the world. And I think that's one of the great things that I feel very fortunate I've had the opportunity to do that in a bunch of different environments.
Yeah. And Nan, it's a very interesting idea about scaling your impact. How do you do that? How do you kind of think about, am I really having impact, or is it just kind of in my head that I think I'm having it versus really affecting, others and organizations around you?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is being open and listening to feedback, really inviting real feedback, not the people telling you how great you are, but here's how you could have more impact. Here's a way that maybe I haven't seen a perspective that others can see, and I think that when you have a culture of open transparency and feedback in your organization, you can hear those things, which are sometimes hard to hear, but you can also be like, okay, well, maybe I should think about that. And let me see if I can explore that, and have a mindset of experimentation, and try things, right? That's one of the great things about some of the leadership training that I've had has been in those kind of leadership labs, where you're trying something new and seeing how it works. So I think that applies when you're looking for more impact in your roles.
Excellent. And so why don't we dive in now, because we're talking about now the innovation and the impact of your impact. Tell us about the Everyday Robots project. And, if you would just start out with a State of the Union, give us the broad landscape about what's happening, what are the offerings, all of those good things.
Yeah, well, I'm excited about it. I can tell you some of it. I can't tell you all of it, but the parts I can say is that we have had a public launch last November, which one that was much more open about what the project is doing. And in fact, you can see some of our robots having left the lab, as we call it, left the lab, and operating inside commercial spaces inside Alphabet. So that our website, everydayrobots.com, has got some beautiful pictures and videos that you can really get a sense about what we're up to. But net, we've been bringing out the robots and teaching them services, things that they can do to help with everyday tasks. So like right now, as I mentioned, they're in commercial spaces. They're doing things like sorting trash. They're doing things like wiping tables, cleaning cafes, so all of these tasks are important to understand that they are learned. They are not scripted. They're not programmed in a way like industrial robots have been. And so when you talk to roboticists, a lot of times if you're in the robotics game, you think, well, robots have been around a long time, but those robots are typically bolted to the floor. They're in some kind of very controlled environment. They're in some kind of perhaps teleopt, where there's an operator who's operating every bit of it. When you start saying like, no, in an unstructured environment, like an office building, like a home, like in outdoors, those kinds of unstructured environments are so complex that they cannot be scripted and programmed. Some people say that, the kind of robotics challenge that we're working on is like self-driving cars. It's at that level of complexity, but the car's not been invented and there are no roads. So you're like, well, wait a minute, that's really, really complex problem. So in part, thinking about when you're getting into like business strategies or in just how you think about solving these kinds of world impact problems, you first have to define the problem, right? You have to have been able to say, okay, well, I think this is the problem. I think this is how we're going to go about it. And then do a lot of experimentation to figure out if you're on the right track.
Yeah. And on that topic, Nan, how do you decide what applications to focus on? How much of it is kind of doability? How much of it is, wow, this is going to solve a really big problem? How much of it is something else?
Well, and that is some of the art of innovation, right? Of being able to know that you're trying to do something new, but not so far out there that it can't actually be done. And, the Moonshot Factory has some, I think, pretty well structured thinking on that, where it's a large problem with a radical, radical approach and a breakthrough technology. Those three, like a Venn diagram of those three things, you tend to find really strong innovation possibilities there. But oftentimes you can find that, well, it's not we're not really able to do that kind of technology breakthrough yet. Maybe that's a decade from now. And so when you're in the sort of far out innovation game, you have to recognize that it may be too soon or not this way. And being able to be really dispassionate about that is one of the great hallmarks, I think, of more moonshot thinking. In our case, there's a lot of experimentation with the robots and teaching them things. Again, it's a learning robot moonshot. And so the robots are being taught. They're taught by experience. They're taught by simulation. We had a huge amount of simulation last year, 240 million robot instances where we were simulating the world. The robots could learn in simulation. So we don't just need the physical world for that. So it's pretty exciting to see the technologies of like simulation and robotics when you're actually out there in the field learning things sort of coming together to produce, what the robots are learning to do.
Yeah. And what applications, you were talking about sorting trash and other things, cleaning cafes. What applications are you most excited about? And, what might we see, in the next few months, the next few years and beyond?
I think as much as anything, understanding that robots are, when they're in an environment like a commercial space, that they're navigating a very complex space for them. And so if you're seeing them clean a cafe, for example, that cafe, a human walks in there and sees it with human eyes, and it looks like, somebody's been in the cafe. A computer, when they see that same cafe, there's an enormous amount of complexity that they have to first perceive and then internalize and understand. So when you see their applications like wiping the table, for instance, or sorting trash into compostables and recyclables, it may look like that the robots get better and better and they're grasping better and better. What we see with roboticists' eyes is unbelievable amounts of just the robot starting to see, if I grasp this cup this way, I'm more successful more often, and so doing that, millions and millions of times in simulation, you start to see just better and better, more natural moving performance. So it's pretty exciting to see that across a bunch of different tasks.
Yeah. And again, analogous to autonomous vehicles, where the more test miles you go, the better accuracy, the more safety.
Correct. And also just the more that the robots understand what works and what doesn't, because if you think about how humans learn as children, that's a lot of what is in childhood, right? You're learning how things work, how gravity works, how you grasp things, and it works better than if a different way. And so we're teaching robots that is a huge part of the moonshot, knowing, as it said in the video, that Morvik's paradox, we live with that every day, that it's, which is easy for humans can be really hard for computers, but also vice versa, and helping figure out these kinds of learning services that we wind up with, blending the best of human and robot capabilities is really what I find really exciting.
Yeah. And at the very beginning, you made a point, and I think in the video as well, about these are machines living and working alongside humans, not per se replacing them. Say a little bit more about that. And does that actually create, in its own way, an adoption challenge? Because now you've got some machine next to you and this feels very bizarre, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, it's hard to express how quickly you get used to the robots in your environment. So like if you were in our offices in Mountain View, literally the robots roll by my desks. I don't know how many times during the day. I don't even notice it. They go by. Sometimes I'll be like, "Hi, how you doing?" You speak to the robot, even though it's not going to speak back, at least not to me. And you look at those kinds of getting used to things, it's very quickly that you get used to the robots in your environment. And in fact, the robots are, because they're autonomously navigating around our building, there are people walking in the same spaces that the robots are rolling around, and the robots will avoid the people. They will make sure that they don't get too close. And all of that is so natural now that you don't even think about it. So I think that's something that we don't see a lot of robot resistance. In fact, one of the interesting side effects of the pandemic has been, and there's even less resistance to having robots in the commercial spaces. And I think the use of robotics during the pandemic has been very, very moved forward in terms of societal adoption. And so you're seeing a lot of people interested in the way the world is going to be when we have robots and humans working together, much as we have with humans and computers working together. It's not, there's less and less of us or them. It's like, no, it's all of us together. And that's really the experience we're trying to design.
Yeah. And so say more again about this idea. I'm trying to think, I'm going back to my Star Trek days I used to watch. Is it basically the idea here is there's kind of a segregation of activities? The robots are off doing one thing. They may be in the same physical space you have humans, or they're actually interactive on multiple activities.
They're actually interactive, but in terms of what they're each most capable of doing. So you look at robots are able to do things that are repetitive, they're dull, they're dangerous, they're not things that necessarily humans want to do a lot of. And yet you say, well, wait a minute, we've got robots that can do that, but robots can't do everything that the humans can do. So in a commercial space, you'll have, humans who are providing some amount of supervision or maybe some sort of help for the robots, but not they're not doing the same jobs. They're basically doing what we would think of as a transformed job. So it's not like it was the same as it was before. It's a transformed job that involves both human and robotic labor.
Yep. Good. So let me dive down again deeper about what kind of society might look like here. So, there's been an interesting study that PwC has done saying when you look at robotics and automation, there's huge upside there. They did a report that said there could be up to $16 trillion in value added by 2030 in the global economy. Separate report, though, predicted that about 30% of all jobs and 44% of workers with low levels of education are at risk of automation, their jobs going away. Tell us how you look at the dichotomy between those two things.
Yeah, it's certainly something we pay a lot of attention to. And I think the main way I would think about it is that it's not really an either or in the way we see it, that the jobs are not, okay, well, it's a computer job or it's a human job. A lot of the statistics that I've seen are like so many more jobs than would be lost by any calculation are going to be transformed, like a huge factor of it. And if you think about what the personal computer did for certain jobs, like maybe bookkeeping became accounting, became, how we do the kind of modern day financial transactions we do now, that you could not have envisioned that back in the days of manual bookkeeping. So what we're going to see with these kinds of robotics advances, especially in general purpose unstructured environments, is all of those jobs transformed in some way. So perhaps a human being is suddenly able to do, instead of one of their own labor, the value of their own labor, now maybe it's 10x, what they were able to have as a human, because they're involved in this transformed job. So that's what we see as exciting, is that it's transformation of the way humans and robots work together, much as you saw the transformation of humans and computers.
Yeah. And is there anything special that society needs to do, enterprises need to do, individuals need to do to make sure they're part of the track of jobs getting transformed, as opposed to just not being there at all, where they're not part of that revolution occurring?
Well, I mean, I personally think, education is such a huge part of what helps people be able to have that capacity for more impact in whatever career and field they've chosen. I mean, certainly education's made all the difference for me, not least, Anderson, and we can talk about that. But it is something that people, I think, need to continue to do their education, but also understanding where they can start to sort of plug into that sort of economy. I think you're going to see more and more robotics out there in more specific applications. And the more people understand that, there's an ecosystem around robotics that, maybe it's not, you don't have to be the person that's designing the artificial intelligence. Maybe you're the person that helps with, the repair of them. There's a whole ecosystem that's going to be there for robotics, just as you see with computers.
Yeah. Let me ask you, Nan, you've got an interesting personal kind of experience on giving back to the community and thinking about kind of this transformation that goes on. You were part of Google's effort to put in a green data center in Bridgeport, Alabama. And this was the site of a coal-fired power plant, apparently where your dad used to work. And it changed the economy, the jobs. Tell us a little bit more about that and outcomes and what motivated you to do that.
Well, I would say that was one of the highlights of my career. Certainly my time at Google was helping with that data center launch in Northeast Alabama. I'm originally from that part of the world, come from very blue collar backgrounds. My father was a maintenance electrician, including at that plant back when it was a coal plant. And so to see that full circle where, I was able to come back to a place where my dad had been, but yet come back not in a cold plant, capacity, but in a green data center, was really exciting. And to see the way the community there reacted, because in rural places like Alabama, North Alabama, there's often a sense of you're somewhat left behind, or it can be a sense of being left behind. And instead, what we saw there was, in fact, some of the community leaders were saying, we are on the digital map now. And our children in our schools, they know that they're on the digital map and that they're part of this global infrastructure that Google was bringing to that area. And so helping people all across the world, but especially places that haven't had the advantages like we have in California, having them have access to these kinds of opportunities is really important, certainly to me personally. And I loved being able to be part of it when Alphabet was doing that with the data center.
Yeah, excellent. Wonderful, wonderful to hear. Other things you think that society needs to do? You started to touch on education, other things. If you basically say, listen, a lot of our economy needs to shift, jobs need to transform, technology can create good outcomes. What are the other things that need to happen that enable successful transitions as opposed to divides from occurring?
Well, I think a lot of things that I think helped better solutions overall come to pass, or when we think of things like involving the externalities of the impact of various technologies, meaning that if you just look at things where there's a little bit of upside business-wise, but you're not really thinking about, maybe in electric cars, if you're not thinking about the whole ecosystem of what does it really take for that to be successful, you don't see the kinds of big moves of impact that you can if both industry and, to some degree, I'd say governments, start thinking about the problems holistically. How do we prime pumps for new technologies? I think that's one of the challenges especially when you have things like electric cars, or even self-driving cars, when you have you need a sort of priming of the pump. The technology needs to be there, but there also needs to be enough scale to start to generate the benefits. So that's something I think is especially as technology leaders, we need to be thinking about that bigger picture, not just our little piece of it.
Yeah. And now, without having to get too quantifiable on all this, we always kind of think about how much of these issues does society own, like our government? How much is it business owns? How much of it is individual needs to own? If you were to kind of say who owns the big parts of this transformation, who would it be?
Well, I think that the answer is really we all do to varying degrees. I think this is partly where individuals need to live values that they can stand behind. Companies need to stand. I actually am a huge fan of mission-based, especially innovation. And I think before I came to Anderson, I used to think mission and value statements were kind of like somebody puts that up on the website. It's not a big deal. Every mission looks the same. They all sound the same. I actually more and more see that as that's a bad mission if it could be any companies. If you really need to have like your efforts be something that's aligned to a North Star mission, and the more that's aligned with impact, and the more that's something that you can all stand behind, I think not only do you have better success in hitting that impact, but you also start to attract the people that see it the same way. And you start to have that cultural resonance where, especially if we have everyday robots, we're really excited about our mission for helping people in their everyday lives with robots. So the people that want to come work with us, they're really excited about that mission. And the more you're aligned with that and you're public about it and you live it, I just seen a lot of good things happen, even to every single day when we're making decisions about, are we going to do this? Are we going to do that? I mean, we have that rubric, we have that touchstone of what our mission and values are. And if you operationalize it like that, it can really be powerful.
Excellent. Excellent. So let me ask you a couple other questions before we go to audience questions. There's a bunch of questions from the audience. Obviously, tonight we're going to hear from the winning teams on our innovation challenge. And they're focused on two areas, healthcare and sustainability. And you obviously got a great background in technology and sciences and leadership and innovation, et cetera, et cetera. Any thoughts about those two areas and things that interest you and where you think they may be going?
Well, I mean, since I'm here talking robots, I'll definitely take it back to that. I think there's so many interesting things, in the healthcare field and in sustainability where robotics is going to make an enormous difference. There's just so many applications in the healthcare setting, including things like, transporting the kinds of materials you need in the hospital, delivering drugs, being able to bring water to a patient in a nursing home. There's so many things like that that we'll be all spending decades uncovering all the different ways that we might be using these technologies. And one thing I will say is these technologies are inevitable. This is a little different than, I'd say, smartphones or personal computers. It's inevitable that robots will be in our unstructured lives doing things. It's just a question of when and how and who. And, I think that's really the exciting part. And sustainability, that I mentioned sorting trash, that is not just hey, we're sorting trash. It's how do we make a sustainable ecosystem of, so that recycling is really something that it continues to deliver, the kind of full circle that we want to see on reuse. And so I think all of these things have benefits from robotics, but they have more beyond that because so much of what we as a society needs to do is focused on sustainability right now.
Mm-hmm. And learnings, Nan, from your work on robotics that could inform innovation in other areas, whether it's healthcare, sustainability, or other areas?
I think tackle hard problems when you can, right? I mean, this is, I think from a business setting, obviously a lot of the economic rewards come when you solve really hard problems. But beyond that, it's also just leaving a lasting mark of, what we're doing here. And I think being able to be in places where you have that kind of impact, being with like-minded people and trying really audacious things that have a big impact is what I definitely recommend people try to find those. Try to find those missions, try to find the people that believe it with you, and then lean in, give it everything you got, and hopefully you'll have that kind of impact.
Yeah. And on that latter piece about kind of building the team and being with like-minded people, how do you do that? Any advice for people about, build an organization that's got the right skills and style?
Right. Well, one thing I'll say is that you certainly don't want everybody to be the same, right? I mean, in the sense of, that was one of the great learnings I got at Anderson. When I showed up at Anderson, I think the very first conference call I had, I was convinced that I had missed reading a paper because one of the people on the call was talking about, the strategy Netflix had followed for something. And I thought, I didn't read that. Well, the reality was I had read that paper with a quantitative mindset. He'd read it with a strategic mindset. So I was able to see that, wait a minute, there's different ways of looking at all of this. And that was one of the great learnings I had at Anderson's, just the power of a really diverse team where we have different backgrounds, different ideas, and different experiences. And we could come up with so much better solutions than any of the kind of overly techie quantified folks were doing. And so that when I'm looking to build a team, I want to have a lot of different voices. I want to have a lot of different capabilities. I don't want to have any of those blind spots. And basically want to make sure people are committed to the mission. It's something that lack of commitment or the commitment in the positive is contagious. And so you really want to make sure that people are bought in.
Excellent. Excellent. Let me ask you a couple last questions related to leadership, and then we'll again go to the audience questions. So give us, your broad view about leadership here and where you think it's going, how the requirements are changing, et cetera.
Well, I certainly seen a lot of change in how leadership, I think how it works in the current workforce. I see more in being able to put yourself out as a leader who's learning, a leader who's on your own journey. You don't have it all figured out. We're all working together to try to figure out the best path forward, being open to really constructive, but sometimes hard to hear feedback, not being, autocratic from the top. That just really does not work anymore, if it ever did. And being able to be a vulnerable leader, I think that's some of the most powerful stuff I've seen over the last few years has been just some of the work around being a vulnerable out there leader. It's even beyond being a servant leader. And I think that's been something I personally enjoy, that kind of environment where, I don't have it all figured out, but together I think we've got a pretty good shot of doing something amazing.
And then last question for you. What is necessary to get more women in technology? We kind of hear a lot about the imperative there. What is your view about what would create better success?
In my career, studying computer science, and then till now, there's been a lot of times when there were not very many women in the room. And in that sense, I have seen it get better. I think the way we continue to get better, and not just with gender diversity, but also with just diversity of the group, is be more open to our the biases that we built in that we didn't really mean to build in. And this is one of the things I've seen, at least in computer science education. There's been some really great innovation in places like Harvey Mudd, where they are not. They're teaching the courses differently than maybe when I took my freshman chemistry courses. My freshman computer science courses. They're more open to project-based. They're more open to the types of things that are more collaborative, which may appeal to more women, at least in those early stages. But interestingly, it appeals to a lot of men too. It's like it's not just this gender difference. It's more like, let's make sure we have an open way of people contributing. And frankly, project-based understanding of how to make a project deliver is really what we do in the workplace every day. It's not about the lone coder, at least not very often. And that's something I think the more we do that kind of collaborative work, transparent, values-based work, I think you're going to find that there's a broader adoption, not only among women, but across a bigger swath of the population.
Excellent. Let me start taking questions. We got quite a few here. The most upvoted question: how do you avoid unintended biases and discrimination in your training data?
You really need to make sure you know what's in your training data. The question's, of course, about artificial intelligence. If you have training data that's biased, it's easy to teach your models something that you don't want them to know, which is some biased outcome. I think being really clear and explicit in what training data you're using, where it came from. We spend a lot of energy at Alphabet on labeling data, making sure we know exactly what it's for, and then knowing what how much data you need to train is also a key part of a lot of models. So it's not all the data that goes into a training set. It needs to be a pretty clean set.
Okay, good. Another question: how does your teaching service approach change when considering users or individuals with either physical disabilities or neurodiversity?
Read that one more time. I want to make sure I'm answering the right question.
Yeah. How does your teaching service approach change when considering users and individuals with either physical disabilities or neurodiversity?
I think when we're teaching robots, we're teaching them in a broad environment. It's not just one where we expect everybody to be operating in the same manner. In fact, when we think about cleaning tables, we're expecting there'll be people around of all kinds of different capabilities, perhaps somebody in a wheelchair sitting there. And so in that sense, it's making sure the training data is legitimate, making sure we have a lot of experience, making sure that we have a broad view of what we expect to see, and that we're continually learning. I think this is one of the things you see from self-driving cars, is that the world is so complex. You need to be continually learning and making sure that your technologies are learning machines.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. And is it fair to say, Nan, on this, we kind of think about technology companies, not just Google as an example, as kind of the heritage was this super iterative approach to development. Put something out, you learn, you try, you see. And it seems like what's starting to happen is there's much more focus now about, well, wait a minute, where's the end state I'm trying to get to? What data am I using? So that this whole idea of planned product design as opposed to kind of just iterations. Is that fair to say, or no, that's kind of a one-off, example?
No, I think there is a lot of, especially when you get to artificial intelligence, there has to be some amount of direction about what we're trying to achieve. But then good product design, I don't think that's changed fundamentally from the earlier days, where you really need to be thinking about who's this for, what's the customer benefit and what's the market for it? How do I go to market? All those wonderful things they teach at Anderson. That's still very much true. It's that the way we design the technology is definitely shifting towards some of these more, certainly machine learning kind of technologies.
Great. Another question: what consumer applications of robotics will be first to reach the mass market?
Well, interesting. I think you already see some of them. Things like Roomba it was interesting, and this may be helpful for those folks studying product design. When I was in graduate school at Caltech, back before Roombas, we had a chip design class where one of the final project was, let's assume you want to make a vacuum cleaner, but yet you don't need to be there with your big vacuum cleaner. So like if I have to be there, then all of a sudden I'm going to want to have a big vacuum cleaner that goes really fast and has a giant motor and weighs a ton. But if I don't have to be there, wait a minute, I've got a whole bunch of different design spaces available to me now, which is what eventually you see with something like Roomba. So when you see the kinds of technologies like that, those are still special purpose. They're still obviously got tremendous advances in that technology, but still a good ways to go. You're going to see more and more things like that. I think our moonshot is beyond that in terms of general purpose and very unstructured environments, learning. That's something that I think you're still starting. You'll see that more and more in robotic applications in the home, in hospitals, and a lot of places.
Okay, good. Another question, in terms of the cafe cleaning example of the robot, they obviously have to be affordable. There's got to be an ROI to get broad adoption. How far away do you think kind of that practical adoption is going to be?
It's really hard to say. I think when you look at where general purpose robotics is, it's still very much a moonshot in a, can you really get to that last few percent? If you look at and when and how do you get to that last few percent of performance, of ability to deliver something of value? So we're still a good ways away from that. That's why we say we've left the lab, but we're still inside Alphabet's offices. Now, keep in mind, Alphabet's got a lot of real estate. And so it's actually a great proving ground for technology, a great place to learn with very tech forward people around, but yet they're still people. And yet we're still working on providing that value to really help people.
Mm-hmm. Good. Let me take a last question here and then do a brief wrap up on this. Carrie asked a question. China's looking to construct a dam entirely via 3D printing. Mm-hmm. What is your perspective about robotic readiness for critical infrastructure with no humans at all?
Well, I would say the technology is not there yet. Mostly when something doesn't go according to plan. That's something that I think in the data center world, at Google scales in the data centers, they're tremendous design, tremendous technology, but there was always something happening, and in that sense, I think the ability for robotics to deal with a fundamental change in the environment around it is still pretty challenging. But that's where I think learning robots is the answer there, because you can't program for everything that might go wrong. You need the robots to learn. And this is where something like simulation can make a huge difference in helping us advance much faster than we would in just ordinary physical world. And I think that's probably the key to a lot of this moving forward fast enough to generate impact soon.
Excellent. Nan, I always like to do brief takeaways at the end of every session, kind of what did I learn? Let me share what I took away, and then you give some upgrades on that. And then obviously we'll have the Innovation Challenge winners to give a readout. I had basically 3 buckets of messages from you. One is about the innovation in robotics itself. Second one is about the enablers. How do you kind of think about what are the enablers required for innovation to occur? And then the third one is leadership itself, and a bunch of great advice there. So on robotics, messages, first of all, this is hard stuff. When you said, autonomous vehicles, it's actually more difficult than autonomous vehicles. And wow, this is pretty tough stuff. So it's very difficult, but notwithstanding that, you basically say they are inevitable. We are going to have it. The variable question here is the timing, where, but it's not a question of are we going to have robots. And the model here is robots with humans. Not necessarily robots instead of humans, but working alongside, which is a very interesting model. Second kind of learning out of all this are the enablers that allow transitions to occur, innovation to occur, society to occur. And your first kind of message is know ecosystems, know all the different piece parts that are required to get some good outcome. And that can be, schools and education. It could be partners. It can be app developers. It could be a lot of people in the mix. but be cognizant about the ecosystem. And then think about, your role in leading a transformation, because this will be a transformation. It's going to be a transformation of work and jobs. It's going to be a transformation of, how we do work, et cetera, tasks, et cetera, et cetera. But be part of it as opposed to kind of sitting on the sidelines. The final piece is on leadership, and it was interesting to hear all the different piece parts. And to me, what I kind of heard is all of these things are all kind of part of a system. You can't kind of say, well, I'm going to focus on innovation, but not worry about enablers. I'm going to worry about enablers, but not worry about leadership. You got to do all this together. Your messages on leadership, several things. Tackle hard problems. When you're thinking about big opportunities, don't be afraid of those. Number two, as a leader, be reflective. Take in feedback. The more feedback you can take in, the better you're going to get, as opposed to insulating yourself from things. Think about the power of the team and the diversity of the team. From your Anderson experience, 1 + 1 needs to equal 3 if you're really making all of that happen. Thinking about diversity and thinking about bias in data, and know what you're trying to kind of work towards, know what data you're trying to use, so that you've got a thoughtful approach to innovation. And then the final thing is be mission-based. For all the people think it's kind of fluffy and all that stuff, it actually, if you're doing it right, will translate into responsible innovation. Nan, upgrades on that? Did I miss anything on your key messages?
No, I think you got it. And, I think, the more we're learning machines and the more we're trying to putting ourselves out there for having greater impact, I think the better leaders will be, the better our companies will be, the better our communities will be. And there's no reason we can't go for that. We don't always have to be saying, oh, it's all about the profit motive. It's all about this. There's actually a bigger picture that we can all be part of.
Yeah, I love the message. It's aspirational, and it says avoid binary thinking. It's very easy to get into things are all good or all bad. And it's kind of copping out on the leadership imperative, which is to find out how you can get the good and mitigate the bad. Right. So excellent. And Nan, you can stay with us for a little bit after the teams present, because I'd love to get your perspective on what you hear.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing their pitches.
Excellent. So listen, let me do this. I want to share a little bit. I'm going to share my screen here, and I want to share a little bit about our innovation challenge and what our innovation challenge is all about, so that when you hear the student winners, the team winners, you'll have a little bit of the context here. So 2 objectives to the Easton Center Cross-Campus Innovation Challenge. Number 1 is just to create great levels of innovation, new product and service innovation that primarily can focus on serving society. So that's the first objective. Second objective is the more timeless piece, which is saying, can we create through this innovation challenge a set of learnings about innovation that can serve future students, future entrepreneurs? So those are the 2 objectives in the Innovation Challenge. As I mentioned earlier, we have 2 tracks in the Innovation Challenge. One is focused on healthcare, and that's healthcare really thinking about the use of technology to create solutions that are going to improve accessibility, affordability, improve overall health outcomes in the US and abroad. The second track is sustainability. And again, it's the use of technology to create sustainable solutions that improve water, energy, food, agriculture, transportation, and/or the ecosystems around them. In the construct of the Innovation Challenge, we want all of our teams to be cross-campus teams. So all the teams have had to have at least 1 MBA and 1 non-MBA, and then they can fill out the teams from there, but they've got to have that mixture of talent. And then all the participants have to be a current UCLA student, fellow, or postdoc. In terms of the timeline of this Innovation Challenge, all of the activity for what you're going to see tonight started in the fall. So we had a kickoff event back in October. We had a series of workshops that help empower all the teams to think about the piece parts necessary for a successful venture and innovation. So whether that be focuses on workshops on financial planning, on how you assemble a team, product management, how do you pitch. All of those things were going on in the fall. Then in the winter, we formally opened the team registration process. And each of the teams that submitted ideas had to develop a business plan, and that was by mid-February. And then we had a group of judges look at the business plans that were submitted and decide on a group of finalists. Those finalists, then we look in the spring, presented about 2 weeks ago, so April 22nd and 29th, to a group of judges. And as you know, we announced the judges just about a week or so ago, and you're going to hear from the winners of the Innovation Challenge. In terms of criteria that are used for the Innovation Challenge, 4 key criteria. First one is impact, the depth and breadth of impact on the enterprise and on the society. Both of those things are key measures. Feasibility. So we don't want just kind of interesting ideas that actually can't be executed on. So all the teams had to demonstrate a pathway to execution. Third criteria was innovation. We're looking for highly innovative, creative, differentiated solutions, not Me Too solutions, but things that are really going to move the needle. And then finally, we're evaluating all the teams on their persuasion skills. All of them are going to have to raise capital. They're going to have to recruit teams. They're going to have to build partnerships, et cetera. And their ability to persuade others is absolutely critical. So as you know, 2 winning teams, so tied for first in healthcare, in Symmetry, and then also Cervicor. And then on the sustainability side, Kelp Magic. And again, you're going to hear from all 3 of those teams. All of this was possible, as I mentioned, with a lot of support, both internally at UCLA, as well as external partners. And then our dean, as I mentioned, Tony Bernardo at Anderson, has been instrumental in advancing this. So big thank you to all of the teams. And what we're going to do now is we're going to start out with them, and they're going to give literally just 3-minute pitches about their ventures. So let's start out on the sustainability track, and I'd like to welcome the Kelp Magic team.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for being here. My name is Karan Giri, and I am representing Team Kelp Magic. So Kelp Magic is truly a cross-campus collaboration with each member bringing a diverse set of experiences and skill sets. So Jessica is a PhD student at the molecular biology program. Greg just completed his JD at UCLA Law, while Daniel and I are 2022 MBA candidates at Anderson. So I'm here today to talk to you about why kelp matters. Kelps are a critical part of the marine ecosystem and found off 25% of global coastlines. It is a keystone species providing resources for marine species at all levels of the food chain. Kelp cycles nutrients like phosphorus and nitrogen, cleaning water of nutrient pollution. Globally, seaweeds are estimated to sequester up to 200 million tons of CO2 each year, which is as much as New York State's annual emissions. Kelp also supports a global aquaculture industry with commercial seaweed production valued at more than $6.7 billion globally. With an annual growth rate of 10.9%, kelp aquaculture is growing faster than any other food production systems. Kelp also serves as a habitat for commercially important fish species and is used as feedstock for abalone and other aquaculture operations. It is an important byproduct used across a range of industries such as bioplastics, pharmaceuticals, and animal feedstock. But all these benefits are being lost due to climate change. In recent decades, increasing water temperatures, ocean acidification, and new predators that are more comfortable in warmer waters, like the purple sea urchin in California, have decimated major kelp forests. Along Northern California's coast, a marine heat wave that started in 2014 contributed to about 95% loss of kelp forests and shuttered fisheries worth up to $47 million. So scientists have observed mass die-offs of kelp forests in Australia and Tasmania, and believe that kelp forests in France, Denmark, and England are at risk of total loss by 2050. This is where we come in. Kelp Magic is focused on giving kelp forests a fighting chance in these rapidly changing ocean conditions. Our solution is an enhanced kelp that will preserve ecosystem health and support a sustainable kelp industry. To do so, Kelp Magic will use a patented CRISPR methodology to genetically modify giant kelp. We'll first focus on designing kelp varieties that thrive in warmer and more acidic oceans, and later optimize for other commercial uses such as bioplastics, pharmaceuticals, as well as looking into carbon sequestration. CRISPR offers the fastest, most efficient, and most precise approach to gene editing, resulting in a cheaper process for selection and breeding. Beyond our core product, our anticipatory governance services will facilitate responsible innovation and sustainable environmental stewardship. Kelp Magic applies knowledge of regulation to expand the market and ensure social acceptance of gene-edited kelp. Kelp Magic is an enabling technology for the growth of this industry, and we will enhance this entire kelp ecosystem. The products and services will be important not just in California, which is our beachhead market, but globally across a broad portfolio of products. And this time, I'd like to thank you and take any questions.
Okay, and let's actually go to the next team and then we'll take questions right after that. So Enzimetry, which is one of our healthcare winners, let's go to you and then we will take the final healthcare team and then we'll do a group Q&A.
Sure thing. And it looks like you guys can hear me well. I'm just going to share the screen.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. My name is Geoff Stepanyan, and I'm here to introduce you all to Enzimetry. What we saw with the COVID-19 pandemic, it actually highlighted the critical importance of the clinical trials process as being the singular pathway to approving novel, life-saving therapies. Now, unfortunately, clinical trials remain extremely costly. On average, they cost around $20 million, extremely time-consuming. They can exceed 7 minutes or 7 years, and also extremely operationally complex. Now, these have led to a number of challenges. Critical and core to those challenges is really patient access to those novel care within clinical trials. If you're receiving your care and you're lucky enough to receive your care from institutions such as UCLA and a metropolitan center, you're lucky because UCLA and institutions such as us have both the infrastructure as well as the resources to have a broad and large clinical trial portfolio. Unfortunately, this isn't really indicative of the greater population. In fact, when we're considering cancer treatment, cancer clinical trials are still considered the gold standard for many clinical trial, many cancer treatments, and especially when you're looking at pediatrics. Unfortunately, only 3% of cancer patients actually participate in clinical trials. And when you're looking at that 3%, it is not representative of the diversity that we see across our nation. And that 3% actually impacts our ability to complete clinical trials quickly because our enrollment numbers aren't met at the timely fashion, and therefore delaying global access to that particular drug. So that's where we come in. Enzimetry is a clinical trial SaaS product that leverages AI to really simplify how clinical research is done. And by that, what we do is really inject machine learning and automation into all facets of clinical research, every sort of time-consuming functions there are. And when we look back at the accessibility issue, now we could simplify and accelerate clinical trials for sites that aren't typically able to have that infrastructure so that they can participate in more clinical trials and be more efficient with the resources that they have, thus democratizing who can participate in those trials overall. Now, our team is well suited to complete this mission because we have decades of experience between operations, strategy, and technology to really tackle this problem. And this is something that we're extremely excited about to bring forth in the coming year. Thank you.
Excellent. And let's take our final team, again, healthcare oriented, and that's Cervicor.
All right, I think everybody can hear me now, right?
Yeah, we sure can.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. David Cho, co-founder, cardiologist, and chief medical officer of Cervicor, a digital health platform increasing women's access to cardiac rehab and decreasing healthcare costs by $2.8 billion per year. Cardiac treatments live on the bleeding edge. In this room, we can rewire the electrical system of the heart, replace heart valves, and open blockages in arteries no more than a few millimeters wide, all without ever needing a surgical incision. So why is cardiac rehab stuck in the past? Despite decades of peer-reviewed research demonstrating its effectiveness, which decreases mortality by 10% per year, and then 40% readmission reduction within the first year, patients are still expected to show up 3 times a week for 12 weeks, monitored in a facility just like the picture I showed you. Cervicor is the future. We are bringing cardiac rehab into the modern era of tech-enabled services through an exciting and engaging heart recovery experience, starting with women. Cardiac rehab remains woefully underutilized despite its proven benefits. Only 31% of eligible men and only 18% of eligible women begin cardiac rehab after a cardiac event. Half of people suffering cardiac events are women, and women have a 20% higher risk for death or heart failure after a heart attack compared to men. Cardiac rehab has a total market cap of over $10 billion. We've identified an initial beachhead market to increase women's participation rates by 13% to match the participation rates of men in cardiac rehab. That market alone is worth over $600 million a year. We plan to expand out to other customer segments in need of cardiac rehab as we continue to grow and scale. Cervicor is an app-based, personalized remote cardiac rehab platform, providing tailored exercise regimens based on individual preferences and access to equipment, along with vitals monitoring to complete the 12-week cardiac rehab program at home. In the Cervicor patient journey, patients are connected with our platform's cardiac rehab services before leaving the hospital. Their equipment is shipped to the home so they can begin their program remotely immediately after discharge. Many patients are unable to travel to a cardiac rehab site due to distance, unreliable transportation, or inability to take time off of work. Our remote services are a key to allowing for geographic expansion and increased access. Cervicor also places a unique emphasis on social connection as medicine. We connect participants into geographically matched small groups to complete their programs together. Additionally, Cervicor's algorithm-based safety monitoring serves as a digital nurse while patients exercise remotely. A wearable device programmed with our adaptive safety algorithm will emit a sound alert to stop exercise if a live heart rate or rhythm is detected in an unsafe range. Cervicor will market our platform to healthcare systems and insurance plans through a capitated payer model in which our services are covered as a clinically equivalent alternative to in-facility cardiac rehab. We will charge the payer a flat rate of $1,500 per patient, collecting a prorated amount every month. With Cervicor, payers can save $3,400 per patient. This is due to decreased hospital readmission rates with cardiac rehab and cost-effective capitated payment model. Our solution delivers value-based care to improve outcomes at a lower cost. We plan to complete our minimal viable product to launch by the end of this year with full product launch in 2023. In the next 6 months, we'll conduct feature validation followed by our clinical pilot study at UCLA Health and continue expansion into regional and national by fall 2023. We have an experienced team designed to execute on our vision and a deep advisory panel with cross-functional expertise. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, listen, let me congratulate all 3 of the teams. They did an incredible job in a very short period of time, explain what they're doing, why they did it, et cetera. So first of all, for those of you in the audience that would like to submit a question, just go on to slido.com. You enter in the event code Easton2, the number 2. So SLIDO, slido.com, enter in the event code Easton2. Let me start out with the teams, and I want to just ask you some higher level questions, especially for those thinking about innovation themselves in the audience that want to start their own venture, enter the innovation challenge, et cetera. Let me just start out and ask each of the teams, how did you come up with your idea, knowing that there must have been a lot of things that you could have done, you had a lot of great people, et cetera, et cetera. Let me start out in Zimetry. Let me just start with you. And how did you come up with your idea? And just brief answers. If it can be 20, 30 seconds, that's great.
Sure. In reality, it was really out of frustration as me being an operator within clinical research. But when I did look at the market, I noticed a couple of things. One, there hadn't been innovation since 2015. And two, big market trends in clinical trials happen every 10 to 15 years, which is about now for us. So we saw that as an opportunity to leverage some of the new technologies that are available to us.
Excellent. Excellent. How about Cervicor?
So I may be a little biased because I'm a cardiologist, but the rest of my team, we all immersed for 3 months within cardiology, in the cath lab, out of the cath lab, in clinics. And we really noticed that once people left the hospital, they were sort of on their own, and there wasn't really much in the way of, what comes next. And it was a very non-standardized way, and patients felt very lost. And, even me as a cardiologist, I didn't really realize how underused or how important cardiac rehab was. And I'm the board certified cardiologist on the team. So from that need, we just went exploring, and we found that there was a great business opportunity as well. And we took it from there.
Perfect. Perfect. And then Kelp Magic.
I can take this one. So I'm in the FEMBA program, and my full-time job is in the law school. And one of the professors I work with has a grant with a microbiology professor to research kelp. And so they were looking at both the CRISPR gene editing technology and the regulatory issues already. And Jess Carsons-Cass, who's also on the call here, is working in the lab right now on CRISPR tech. So it was very easy for us to just jump in and start looking at the potential business model and markets that this existing research team hadn't really considered.
Excellent. Let me ask another question. By the way, at the end, I'm going to ask Nan her views on all of this, knowing she's got many years of success under her belt doing this. So let me start with the Cervicor team. So, each of the teams, and certainly Cervicor mentioned this, the power of the team. And you listed a lot of the people on the team that are important. What are your best practices and advice for students about how to assemble a team? And how to assemble a team in the construct of UCLA with an innovation challenge and partnering across campus?
I think the biggest thing is being hungry and being curious. I think everybody on the team asked a very similar question. I think with enzymatic team as well, like the why, like why is it done this way? And you'll find that there's many people asking why, and they may not have the domain expertise, but once you sort of cross-pollinate across all those different fields and network, I think if you just keep asking why and just nudging people that you know to put you in touch with other people, you'll sort of find a like-minded community and hopefully co-founders.
Excellent. Excellent. Great. And Kelp Magic?
I can jump in again. Again, we got just really lucky that there was this existing research project that was already collaborative. And I think that there's a number of, there's a number of UCLA programs that are bringing together professors and faculty and students. And we just got really lucky that Jess and the law student, who we also worked with, Greg Stevenson, were already engaged in this research project and could jump on the Innovation Challenge team.
Perfect. Perfect. And then enzymetry.
Yeah, I think the core challenge for me and our team was really try to figure out what are our strengths and what are our weaknesses and how we can fill those. And it is a bit challenging trying to find co-founders and partners on specific projects. So in an institution like this, my recommendation would be lift every rock you can, be vocal about the project you're working on so that the community hears. And that's how Hetman and I actually started working on this project. And really evaluate each other, make sure you're working with each other on top of filling those gaps instead of having similarities and experiences.
Yeah. And Geborg, any recommendations working literally across campus? Anderson at one side of the beautiful campus of UCLA and the medical school on the other. Any suggestions?
I would say that a lot of folks are really excited to contribute to projects, to be honest. So, just make the effort of reaching out to as many people blindly as you can, because especially in UCLA, the community is really hungry and really helpful. If they're not the partner, they'll at least lead you along the path. And that's how we got here, especially with Neil and Hetman. Mm-hmm. So like David mentioned, Dr. Cho mentioned, be hungry and just make sure you have that drive to find the folks that you're looking for.
Excellent. Couple last questions here. Let me start with Kelp Magic on this. Biggest learnings you had so far with your idea, getting your venture moving?
I can take that one. I think the biggest learning for us as a team was that the knowledge and information is there. You just have to have the drive and desire to get to it. Working on this innovation challenge also made us all aware of how collaborative one needs to be in a team. There were certain skill sets that I brought in that others did not have, and then there's some that others brought in that I did not have, and it's just a matter of putting them all together to build a product or a business, whatever it may be. It's truly the collaboration is what is the secret sauce.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. And then Cervicor.
I think one of the best lessons I've had is just because one domain expert thinks it's a great idea doesn't necessarily mean it translates across all domains into a successful business venture. So one of the feedback, like every cardiologist says cardiac rehabs, we need it. But when making the case to, Anderson people, venture capitalists, people in the industry, it needed a lot of refinement, a lot of research, a lot of sort of development along that category so that the clinical need could match the business need together. And from there, we're still working on it, but it's definitely has accelerated and has coalesced into getting broad buy-in across the various stakeholders who will need to make this endeavor successful.
Perfect. Last question for you guys. Your single piece of advice for future teams here in Zimetry?
That's a good one. I would say think big, really think about, the challenge ahead of you. I think the innovation challenge was a good opportunity for us to present what we've been working on. But, I think because of having just a grand idea, it's really exciting. And that's kind of what really drove us.
Excellent. Kelp Magic. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just to add to that, the innovation challenge was fantastic from our point of view because of the kind of the quality of advisors. It's a really vibrant advisor set, and we really made like our good use of our time from talking to them and really getting wisdom from the years before us.
Excellent, great to hear. And this wasn't a paid ad either, so we're glad to hear it was helpful. Kelp Magic.
I'll kind of second. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Second, the point that was just made, which is that this was an opportunity that we wouldn't have had to contact CEOs and COOs of companies, and they actually talked to us because of this. And that was what I learned the most from, in terms of technology development and actually getting an idea off the ground. So that was a really cool part of this, and it was something that I was happy we were able to take advantage of through this challenge.
Excellent. And Cervicor.
I will probably just echo what everybody says here. I think it's really about being able to execute, and this program really helped us accelerate our own early stage development. Make checklists, connect with people who will help sort of give great advice, feedback, and mentorship. And really, it would have been hard to piece this all together just for people in a room without the external support from this program.
Excellent. Very, very helpful. And so, Nan, let me go to you. And I was trying to as I listened to the teams and their advice and listened to your feedback, I basically heard you say 4 things that I thought was fairly well reflected in the team's unaided. Pick a big problem you talked about, and pick something. Don't be limited, too much up front. You talked about thinking about society and the people that you're serving and how that goes into product design and how important that is. You talked about the ability to balance doability against big view, and you want to advance on both of those. And then you talked about the power of the team. So it seems like some very interesting overlaps. Let me ask you the very final question, which is your reflections on what the 3 teams are talking about. And if you want to extend it into a second part, your advice to them.
Well, first of all, I want to say congratulations to the teams. Very impressive to hear your pitches and to hear what you've been working on. I think the fact that you picked such big problems that have a huge impact on the market and on people and on the communities was really impressive. So I commend you on that. And I love the way you were going about it. Each of you was curious about what's different now. Like, why is this problem important now? Or why is this problem can be solved in a different way? I thought that was really impressive across all of your teams. So I commend you on both of those, especially when you can use new technology that wasn't available before or some convergence in really making a big difference. I think that was just terrific. And my advice with you is, keep refining those ideas, keep seeing what kind of impact you have. Always understand who's the customer, who's paying the bill, and who gets the value. Not always the same group. That's one thing I learned at Anderson. And that's the kind of thing that it sounds like all of your ideas can really have a big impact. So congratulations.
Yeah, excellent. Well said, Nan. And let me just add my own. I think about what the objectives were of this innovation challenge. And I just want to say to the three teams here, you guys were living out the objectives of the innovation challenge. One is to come up with promising innovation that's going to affect society in a positive way. The second thing is a set of learnings so that when we think about the next generation of innovators and students, et cetera, there's a set of learnings that allows them to kind of learn from what you've done and get better and better. So let me just say a huge congratulations for what you've achieved, what you've done. Let me just say, listen, in closing, a big thank you to a bunch of people here. First of all, I want to thank Nan because, she's got such great experience and she's been very willing on multiple occasions to come back to Anderson, to share those learnings and to help the leadership journey of all of us. I want to thank all of the partners I mentioned. This year we had more collaborative partnerships with the Innovation Challenge than we ever have, and we're in our third year now. Tony Bernardo, our dean, who is encouraging us to reach across boundaries. He's walking the talk about teamwork. I want to again congratulate all of the teams, everybody that submitted, including the winning teams that are here. The Easton Center team that makes these events look easy. A big thank you to Heather, Dorina, Jamie that do a great job. And finally, to all of you as an audience. Your interest, your questions energize everybody that's here. So a big thank you. You guys make me proud to be a Bruin, and we look forward to seeing you. Continued success. Take care, you guys.